As a scientist, I can tell you that Sundays are only 24 hours long. But with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get every game every Sunday all in one place. That's upwards of 30 hours of NFL in one day. How can there be 30 hours in 24 hours, you ask? I have a theory. Magic. New users get NFL Sunday Ticket for 8 payments of $34.50 per month. Sign up at NFLSundayTicket.com. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games and commercial use. Terms and embargoes apply. Availability varies.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar. Zero patience for slow walkers. Those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night. Have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to How We're the Podcast. It's Martin here, and we join you the day after transfer deadline. The transfer window is shut. We've had approximately 187 players linked, 24 planes tracked, and 99 days since the playoff final when Tommy Watson sent us back up into the Premier League. And there's been an awful lot to talk about in those 99 days that followed that day at Wembley. Joining me today for a little bit of a look back at the summer, which I actually think is probably the most exciting, interesting and ambitious summer we've ever had as a football club. That's how I see it, but we will delve right into it. And joining me today to help me do so is Andrew Smithson. How are you, Andrew?
I'm good, thanks. And also, I'm a lot calmer now. Like you say, it's all done and dusted. After all of those links and all of those planes we were tracking, yeah, it's nice to now just be able to look back on it all and work out what this actually means going forward.
And I think a lot of people are going to have a little bit of kind of, what's the right phrase, where you've been anticipating something for so long, you've been looking at everything, looking at all the rumours, all the tweets from journalists, waiting for Fabrizio Romano to get cracking with a deal and looking for his tweets, and there's going to be nothing now well, having said that, we've got a few outgoings, there's still a few windows open across Europe, so some players may move out. But there's going to be a bit of a void when we get into the end of this week and the transfer windows are shut around Europe and we actually haven't got any proper football to watch for a little while.
It's always funny, isn't it, that the transfer window usually lines up with an international break. So, yeah, you have this, like, mad period and then, yeah, there's nothing happening. But I tell you what, Martin, mate, there'll be a few managers on your side quite happy that one or two of their staff might actually get some work done now. You know, there's probably been plenty of fans not doing their work and just spending their time on Twitter and following all these links. So yeah, productivity might increase over the next few days, which is a good thing, I dare say.
It may well do. And of course, look, we had a flurry of activity on Monday. 3 players coming into the club, and the very bizarre situation of a player who had joined being returned to his parent club, but we'll move on to that in a little while. But I want to take you all the way back to Wembley, and after the euphoria kind of died down a little bit, we were left with a very daunting prospect of the squad taking on the challenge of the Premier League. And I think even the most optimistic of us kind of knew that we needed to strengthen relatively considerably. But, you know, personally, I thought there was 7 or 8 players in that team, that squad could very, very easily make the step up to the Premier League to some extent or another. Have you been surprised at how, if you take yourself back to the aftermath of Wembley, and we're sat here today with however many hundreds of millions spent, 13 new players technically, and 14 in another manner of speaking, but are you surprised at how we've approached things?
Yes. Yeah. My conversations on the way back with Wembley with my mate and the family who I went to the game with were all along the lines of, we will spend, but we were thinking it would be 3 or 4 quality additions and that would be it. Because, we were reeling off plenty of names in the squad from last season that we thought could do a job. And now, as you and I are talking, Martin, some of those names, they're not even guaranteed a place on the bench. And those are the ones that have hung around. We've had to say our goodbyes to some of them as well. So it's massive. And the money that's been spent, I think our transfer record for a long time was Darren Bent, and then there was Didier Undong, and I don't know if we actually ended up meeting all of the clauses on that one or if he actually became our record signing or not. But in this summer, there's now 9 or 10 players, all of which cost more than those. So complete change around and completely surprised, but a bit like yourself, I'm guessing, pleasantly surprised as well. It's been a mental few weeks, but it's been an enjoyable few weeks.
It sure has. And the transfer activity kind of started immediately, didn't it? Because we'd obviously had an agreement with Roma about Enzo Olafé. He joined on loan in January. And, his spell at the club up to that point had been disrupted a little bit by injury. But he come back through the playoffs, took the corner for Ballard to score the winning goal against Coventry, played a big part in the final against Sheffield United. The fact that we got promoted triggered a clause in his contract with the club, so he was made permanent. There was part of me was thinking that was going to be our biggest signing of the summer. And he was our record transfer. You talk about record transfer fees paid. He was our record transfer fee for only a matter of weeks until we really sprang into action, wasn't it? So he held the records for a little while. But a couple of things happened very early on after Wembley that I think were pivotal in how we approached this transfer window. One was Jobe. Now, Jobe had been, I think he'd done great for us last season. I really enjoyed watching him play for us. I really enjoyed watching how he developed over his 2 years at the club. I know it's a little bit of a cliche to say he came as a boy and left as a man, but I actually think he did. He came as a young, inexperienced player. He played like a young, inexperienced player for a lot of that opening couple of months he was here. But he grew and grew, and I thought last season he looked a good player. But obviously, Jobe, his family, the Bellingham brand wanted him to move on. And, maybe after Wembley, the perception from them was his ambition was bigger than Sunderland's ambition. There was part of me that was thinking that Jude, having not played in the Premier League, might play a part in Jobe actually wanting to do something different to what his brother did. But the fact that he had decided quite quickly that he wanted to move on, and the Club World Cup was happening, and they had that weird little transfer window, didn't they, before the Club World Cup? I think us getting a good fee for him was one of the things that set the foundations of what we subsequently went on to do. The other thing that happened early on was Florent Ghisolfi came in from Roma as director of football, which again, from our perception, was kind of going, well, shit, we actually mean some business here. To bring this guy in to take that role on, it was a big statement, wasn't it? When you look back now, how important were those two things, do you think?
I think they were major. The Ghisolfi thing was funny because, as with a lot of new arrivals at Sunderland, either on the coaching staff or the backup staff or the players themselves, you don't know these names. You've never heard of them. And then within half an hour, it's gone from, there's a fella called Ghisolfi might be coming, to it's done. This bloke's actually going to be joining Sunderland. So you're scrabbling around trying to find out who they are. But immediately when you're reading about Ghisolfi, everything you see makes you think, oh, we mean business here. This isn't just some chump. This is a fellow with some pretty serious clubs and experience on his CV. So yeah, that was massive. And the Jobe deal and the way it went about was really important. Sunderland had obviously had some sort of agreement with the Bellingham brand, which is a good name for them because they're an interesting family, and how they treat their careers is fascinating. We'd had an agreement with them, Martin, it would appear, but that didn't mean we were going to allow a club to just come and take the mick and lowball us. We were quite firm in our value of him. We made sure we got the money that we thought was right, but at no point was there any mudslinging or accusations of Sunderland being difficult to deal with. I think it's really important to get a good reputation. That's something that was quite interesting about the Guiu thing. Christian Speakman was keen to mention that we still have a good relationship with Chelsea, so that whole saga hasn't affected our reputation. It's perhaps enhanced it with some clubs that we were sort of accommodating. So yeah, the way Jobe left was important. It says to other players that we're a trustworthy club. You can come here. We're not going to do you dirty or in any way stop you moving on when the time's right. And also, from what I gather, the money that was brought in then just gave us that little bit of extra freedom in terms of PSR or whatever the terminology is to do some of these deals. We didn't spend a lot in the Championship. We then have this sudden injection of cash, and it's meant that then when we start picking up the phone, making offers for players, we can put down decent first installments, and it just gets those conversations going. So yeah, they were massive steps, and the Jobe one could have been seen very differently. Fans could have panicked and thought, hang on, we're going into the Premier League, we're losing one of our best players. Is it time to panic? Well, no, because the club were fine with it, dealt with it properly, and used it to their advantage. So yeah, they were really fundamental in everything that's happened since then, I think.
And we have also been joined today by Chris Wynn. How are you, Chris?
I'm all the better now for sitting and being able to speak to you because everything else is sorted. So I can get back to the football, which is the main thing, isn't it?
Which is absolutely the main thing. And Chris, the fact that we seem to have this gentleman's agreement with Jobe and his family that he could leave at a certain point. I think that was the feeling all the way through last summer, that especially if we didn't go up last season, especially if we didn't go up, we'd be quite happy for Jobe to move on. And look, I don't want to take cheap shots, and I don't want to draw unnecessary parallels, but standing by your agreement and doing that deal early, in contrast to how other clubs have decided to go about business, has genuinely set us up well to go into that transfer window, because not only did we know that we needed to replace him, we had time to replace him, but it gave us the leverage in terms of our spending to actually go out and do stuff. And also, look, it sends a message out to players who you want to recruit, because our sell this summer, let's all be realistic about it. Our sell this summer to all of these players who've come in, especially the younger lads, will be come here, do well for a season or two, and there's a chance you'll get a move to a Champions League club. And if that happens, and if the money's right and all that sort of stuff, we won't stand in your way. That'll be in the conversation this summer, won't it? So, like, how important, on so many levels, do you think that bit was, Chris?
Yeah, at the start of the transfer window, I think we talked to a few journalists, and I asked them that exact question. I think basically, I think it was by design. I want to think it was by design that the start of the window sent out two important messages. And the first one was, I think they knew Jobe was going to go all along. And I think that was the plan. And, regardless of what happens, I think if you saw Jobe Bellingham at the end of the final whistle at Wembley, I think we all knew what was happening then, basically. And I do wonder, the only thing I do wonder is it could have been potentially a summer saga if it wasn't for the Club World Cup. I think that potentially accelerated things a little bit. But I think we knew the type of money we were looking for him to bring in. And I think, as you said, there was two messages in what we did earlier in the summer. The first one was Jobe Bellingham going, which then was basically, it was almost like we could stick it on the brochure when we went out to, potential signings, where we could say to the likes of Chems and Talby, Diarra, Siddiqui, Adingra, look, sign 5-year contracts with us and be safe in the knowledge that if you're ready to move on and on to bigger things, we'll make a profit, you'll play well. The club does well out of it, you do well out of it, you get a good career, everyone's a winner. Like we're not doing that. You've seen it so many times this summer where people are trying to force players to stay and nobody really wins. I mean, who wins out of that scenario, really? And yeah. I suspect actually even Liverpool have got Isak, who maybe isn't in the right frame of mind because of what the saga that's gone on all summer. So I don't think anyone's really a winner out of those situations. So I think that's the first thing we did. But we got the money in because you're talking 30 million. Or 30 odd million or whatever. I mean, that was basically, we just did a swap with Diarra. And I do wonder, I think if you ask him very quietly, I'd imagine that with the way Labrie wants to set up his side, that Diarra is the more type of dynamic midfielder you'd want in there. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Bellingham would have been brilliant. I think he is a fantastic player. He's going to potentially be one of the best midfielders in the world. I just think Labrie likes dynamic players to play ahead of that defensive midfielder. And I'm not sure Bellingham really kind of fitted the mold 100%, even though, like I said, he would have been fantastic. But the second thing we did was behind that, we lined up Enzo Lefebvre. So we didn't have this, perception that, everyone's just jumping ship now who wants to go on to bigger things from Sunderland. We had this signing lined up in Enzo Lefebvre, who then we could give him the other part of the brochure and say, look, we'll back you up, but look at the type of players we're bringing in Enzo Lefebvre, top-class player from Roma, brilliant player, and he signed for us in the Championship. He's got that much confidence in what's going on. So we had all this set up. We had the spiel there to say this is already happening, this is in motion. And then that players like Diarra and Siddiqui and all them could look at that and go, well, brilliant players coming in. They're gonna support me moving on in my career. I think we just set everything up in those two moves right at the beginning of the summer.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And it's nice that the club now seems to be moving really quickly. We had a spell, even in the Championship where we were progressing, but we had players like Ross Stewart, we had players like Jack Clark, who their own perception of themselves was that they were moving forward more quickly than the club was. They needed to take that next step because we wouldn't get them there. And now it's almost as if we've whacked down the accelerator and some players are hanging on for dear life to try to keep up with the pace that the club is moving at. And I agree with you, Chris, to some extent. I actually think, again, if you ask Christian Speakman off the record, he wouldn't have been too unhappy if it was, and I think it obviously was, Jobe decided he wanted to leave because you knew you cash in on them. And if they had the plans that we've seen executed over the summer in place at that point, they might have had a nagging doubt going, I'm not sure Jobe's going to be first choice next season.
Yeah.
And that brings with it a whole other world of problems, as we've already seen over at Dortmund, by the way, in terms of how that's all handled. So it could have been absolutely perfect timing with Jobe deciding to leave, him getting that transfer early in the summer, because it's enabled us to go out and splash the cash and attract the right profile of player that Labrie genuinely wants. Because don't forget, Labrie inherited Jobe along with the vast majority of other players, didn't he? The other thing which happened earlier on was obviously the fixture list got announced. And I still think that played a bit of a part in it, where the club are looking at that early run of games and going, there's a chance to get a few points on the board here. And I think that kind of expedited a few of those early transfers. We saw a lot of cash get laid down for Diarra and Siddiqui and Talby very early on in that window. And they were being linked with, certainly Diarra was on the verge of Leeds, or rumoured to be. And then when he came to Sunderland, Siddiqui was rumoured to be on the verge of going to Leeds, and then we got him as well. But Andrew, do you think that kind of came into it as well, where they thought, we've got an opportunity. If we get this right and get these lads settled in, we've got an opportunity to really kind of start the season relatively strongly.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if that came into their thinking, because the people running the club at that level and setting out the plans seem to take everything into factor and work out what they're going to do on the back of that. And yes, we could have be having a very different conversation this morning had we had 3 really tough games and been turned over in all of them. But yeah, we were given this opportunity to get a few points and get up and running quickly. And to maximise that chance, we did need to have the majority of our players in place. So, I can very well imagine the club looking at this, rubbing their hands together and saying, right, come on, we are being given this little bit of an advantage here. Let's make the most of it. But also, fixtures or not, it makes good sense to get things done early where possible, because there's a few players now who've probably been here a month to 6 weeks and are starting to settle. So those last 3 players who came in on Monday night are not coming into a dressing room that's all over the shop. They're joining a squad which is already settling down and making relationships and connections with each other.
Well, no, that's right. And there was a number of them were in to go to Portugal as well, weren't they? So they had that pre-season trip away with everybody to build relationships and kind of get accustomed to things. It gives you a bit of time to move house or get accommodation sorted out or what have you. So it makes sense. But, we've certainly over the past, 7 seasons, we've become accustomed to us waiting to August to turn around, to the transfer deadline to come, to wait for the scraps to fall off the big table to then see what's left. And it's been quite a nice change of pace, hasn't it, in that regard?
Yeah. Well, we haven't waited for those dominoes to fall in the last stages, have we? We've always waited for that one deal to fall, which then triggers off all the others and makes some of those younger players available. But the thing is, it's another sign of the type of market and how we're doing our shopping now. Because instead of waiting, saying, right, this is our budget, and now we've got to see the lay of the land, and we've got to wait until teams have got an excess of players where actually we can get these players on the cheap. We went out to these clubs, and we went out to the Strasbourgs and Club Bruges and Union, SG, all of those clubs, and just said, right, there's 20 million on the table for this young player, and kind of take it early in the window. And, some of these clubs wanted to get their business done as well. So we were kind of so proactive in that market that you saw Leeds fans reacting, saying, well, we've been tracking this player for a month, and we just came in and went, there's 20 million. What do you want from him? And the whole Xhaka deal as well, where we weren't messing about. We weren't, it seemed to drag on for quite some time. But in terms of transfers, it was only over the course of a week or 10 days where we came in with the initial bid, and then we went, right, well, they went, 15 million. No, actually 18 million. And Kirill Louis-Dreyfus just kept writing another check and just said, well, yeah, let's get it done. How quickly can we get it done? And that's the different things. And talking about planning, because you heard Regis Labrie a couple of times in the pre-season too, saying he gave a couple of hints at times, because everyone was going, oh, you must be happy with, how the transfer window's going. And at the time you were looking at Diarra, 21-year-old, Siddiqui, 20 years old, Talbi, 20 years old, Adingra, 23 years old. And he kept hinting, saying, yeah, it's good, but I'm waiting for my experience. He was almost saying he said, I want that. I've asked for that. And he was almost hinting that they'd done half a job. And he was like, I'm waiting for the other half of the job to be done. And they went out and then they got the Granit Xhakas and the Alderetes and Mukeles and all of that. The other thing as well, in terms of planning, and Andrew touched on this, or it might be you, Martin, in terms of that planning and looking ahead, I think one of the really clever things, and it's a sad thing in a way, but I think it's brilliant that we've got a club who does this and looks at this, once upon a time, we'd have been held to ransom with the fact that Dennis Serkin and Dan Neil were out of contract. And even potentially Patrick Roberts. You would have been looking at it going, right, these two players are out of contract. And, they did such a good job. There were such big players in getting us up. We want to keep hold of them. We're desperate to keep them at the club. And what we went and did this summer was not only protect ourselves against it, where now we're like, would like them to stay, but it's a bit of, well, if they go, they go. And that's an incredible position to be in, that they were such important players last season. And that we've went and just almost sidestepped them and went, right, well, actually, we're going to buy players who are better than you. And now it's your choice whether you want to fight it out at this club and be as good as the person we brought in, or you leave. And it's the business, it's the whole kind of business type of being a football club that, you almost take the emotion out of it slightly, where it says, well, thank you, you did that job because that's your level, but now you're fighting it out with better players and it's up to you to be better. So protecting ourselves against that sort of thing. And I remember at the start of the window as well, it was almost, I think Andrew was touching on it just as I joined that, we're talking about the potential panic with Jobe. Well, we were expecting, before he got injured, Mundell was going to leave and make that move away.
Right, yeah.
And we thought he was, so, and now we're looking on the wings, the players were brought in, and we're like, well, is Mundell going to get a game now? Whereas at the start of the window, there was a slight bit of, oh no, we're starting to lose players here. And is Dan Neil going to sign a contract? And he's our best midfielder. Now all these players are on the periphery of the first team squad.
No, it's right. And there is part of me that kind of wishes that, like we've talked about before, right? When we've seen teams go up in the past, seen Dennis Smith's team go up in the top flight, we've seen Peter Reid's teams go up in top flight, and you're looking forward to seeing how the likes of Dan Neil, Dennis Serkin, people like that do in the Premier League. But the club has realised, and as you're completely spawned, like they've operated without sentiment coming into the thinking, whereas football fans, we operate on sentiment. We form attachments to players. We love certain players. We want to see certain players do well. And the club have operated really ruthlessly. And they're going, this is what we need to do to build a side that has a fighting chance of staying in the Premier League.
They've operated without sentiment, Martin. However, I will say they've also operated professionally. Nobody's been just thrown on the scrap heap or what have you. It's been done in the right way.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I love the fact that when the likes of Patrick Roberts goes, Christian Speakman is really high praising of the job he's done and how he's helped move the club along. I think that's another message to potential incomings that we're trying to do things right. Also, the sheer fact that we're able to wish people like Patrick Roberts all the best is a damn sight better than in the past when players are going and we're all saying, flipping heck, where's my car keys? I'll drive them down there myself because we want shot of these lads.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really pleased with that aspect of things. One thing I just wanted to touch on, if I may, gents. Chris, you were talking about Xhaka and how Louis Dreyfus was not messing about. If Leverkusen wanted an extra couple of million, he would sign the check.
I'll send me playing across, he said.
Yeah. It shows, it makes players feel valued. It's the right way to go about things. However, with that defender from Bologna, whose name, unbelievably, has now escaped me. Yes, given the fact we've been linked with him for ages. There have been times when we haven't just blindly paid out whatever for the sake of it. The club are confident enough in their valuations and in their other options that if a deal isn't going to happen, they're able to walk away from it. And again, that's brilliant. Knowing when to increase a bid to make a particular deal happen, and knowing when enough's enough and saying thanks but no thanks, that shows real conviction in what you're doing. And again, that is just such a change from in the past where it was desperation almost in our negotiations. I think clubs probably smelt the fear as we walked in, whereas now nobody's going to look at Sunderland and think, oh, we'll get a bit of a extra bonus off them here for the sake of it.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about Ghisolfi at the start, and I think that's reaping the benefit of someone like that with that experience, where he knows the players at some of these clubs, and he knows the clubs that are serious when they talk about valuations and the ones who are messing you about. And I think that's the difference. That when you've got that knowledge in your club, you almost put that first bid in, knowing what the first reaction's going to be, and then what your plan is after that. You've got a plan in terms of how you negotiate with them, and you know the players and you know the people who will mess you about, so you know how to play things.
Yeah, that first bid is never going to be accepted. But just for argument's sake, you'll have your plans and you'll say, we'll bid 10 million, but we're willing to pay up to 18 million or whatever it is.
Well, like I kept saying a couple of weeks ago, it always seemed like our first bid was 10 and our second bid was 20, and then it was accepted for a few.
Yeah. But that was because they'd obviously worked that out and done the figures and decided what was a reasonable valuation. What we haven't done is bid 10 million. They've asked for 20 million. We bid 20 million. They've then gone, we'll have 25 million. So do you know what I mean? We have shown real authority, and throughout all of this, we've done it politely. We've not upset anybody. We've not rocked the boat. We've tried to conduct business behind the scenes in a professional manner. But I honestly think that now, if you've got a player and Sunderland are interested, you have an idea of how they're going to conduct themselves and what is reasonable and what is the breaking point.
Yeah. And just quickly as well, just in terms of that going in early that we talked about earlier on, I think we did all of that business before the market kind of, because the market during the window kind of finds its position on what the valuation is of players, I think. And it goes off the transfers that are going on at the same time, because then clubs can point to other ones and say, well, he's gone for that much, so he's worth 20 million more than him, and things like that. When we go with it in those with the early valuations, clubs have got to assess and go, actually, well, what is his valuation to this club? And we haven't got too much to base it off in the current market. So we've gone take it or leave it with some of those younger players, especially the raw ones who've just had a breakout season. And I think if you look at the likes of Robin Roofs and people like that, I think it seems like we're getting them for a bargain.
Well, I think we have, and I think that is testament to not only the negotiation, but just the scouting that we've obviously got, and the whole team behind the recruitment has been really impressive. But there's a few bits I want to sort of drop back to. So I think, Andrew, you made the point of us acting, yes, without sentiment in terms of holding on to players and giving players games if they didn't think they can make the step up. That's obviously very different from operating really professionally. And as you say, I think we have, in terms of how we've looked after players, how we've gone about our business. That's been a hallmark of this regime since it came in. Like, if you remember Jordan Willis, when he was crocked, they gave him a year's contract. They knew he probably was never going to play for the club again, but they gave him a contract to see him through until he was ready to go out to another club, rather than leave him without employment for a year. They've done things like that throughout the course. And I just think that word gets around in terms of that's a good employer to work for. That's a good club to go and work for, because they'll look after you. And I think, we've slowly but surely gained that reputation of being a good club to play for, play at, and also deal with.
Well, that all counts for a lot, because we can't pay some of the fees that the club at the very top are able to offer. So, yeah, we have to show players fees and wages, actually. We have to show players that we offer something different. And listen, I know from my personal experience, if my boss at work looks after me and treats me right, I'm going to work harder. I'm just going to feel more comfortable and be better able to perform my job. You're right, though. This has been a long time coming, Martin. This has been happening ever since League One. Football is a horrible business sometimes, and yet you could think you're top of the world one day, and then you pick up an injury and your career's ruined. Sunderland can't change that, but they can still operate within those quirks of the game and try and make it as good as possible. And something you said a canny while ago, Martin, I think the term you said was we either accelerated our plans or we put our foot down. This type of thinking has been in place now, and all we've seen this summer is that we've turbocharged it, and now we're doing it with bigger amounts and more established players. But yeah, this hasn't fallen into place by mistake. The summer we've had is as a result of 3 or 4 years of careful planning and just executing things properly.
Well, yeah, just add to that. There was a lot of questions asked, wasn't there, in the championship, but especially around the striker situation when we weren't going out spending 5, 6, 7 million like some other championship clubs on a striker, and it was all because they knew that if they could get up with a good young squad who they'd brought in, being very clever to build in terms of even the Isidore transfer. Look at that for what was it, 2.5 million in the end? Absolutely ridiculous. Stupid money in terms of a striker who's going to, fire goals to the Premier League. My ender was 1 million or something like that. I mean, to have a strike force of 3.5 million to get you to the Premier League. But all of that planning, like you say, Andrew, absolutely spot on. All of that planning and doing it in that way means you're in such a good position when you're promoted because you can build a new team. Like you've got that wiggle room with PSR and all of that coming into play, that you've got the funds and you've got the room to do what we've done this summer.
Now, a big pivotal moment in this pre-season was the arrival of Granit Xhaka. We've touched upon it a little bit, but this was one that did drag on for a little bit longer than the other ones did. The likes of Diarra, Siddiqui, Talbi, Adingra, those players kind of arrived almost the same day as we were first linked, which kind of demonstrates that we're not doing a business out in public. We are doing a lot of talking behind the scenes, getting things happening behind the scenes, and then jumping in to strike the deal when the opportunity is there. Xhaka was a little bit different. I think that probably is down to his profile as much as anything else, and the fact I think Ten Hag, who has obviously left the club already now, hasn't he? I think he was one to kind of show he was in charge, and it backfired a little bit. But Andrew, in terms of a high-profile signing, where does this rank?
Oh, up there. Yeah, up there. He's just a name that pretty much all football fans know. He's a quality player with big clubs on his CV, big achievements. He's captain of his country. From all accounts, he's a really popular player in his country as well. But he's got the quality to back it up as well. He is a really, really good player. And probably one of those players that it's only when they're in your side and you're watching them a little bit closer that you realise everything they can do. I'm really guilty of watching a game as a neutral and not really paying enough attention. But now he's in a Sunderland shirt. He just looks, he looks brilliant. And the fact that he's so high profile and he's so experienced probably means that the club knew that when they were buying him, he was going to settle straight in. He was going to be the type of person you could give the armband to. And this deal and like so many other deals, we always go back to the same point. The reason they happen is because the club have looked at it, assessed his strengths, and made it happen. It isn't chance. It isn't chance that he's come along and they've gone, oh, actually, he's really good in the dressing room. And in terms of profile, I'm aware that at the weekend there was a journalist from a big Swiss.
He was from the marketing department at Nike, clearly.
Yeah. He was Switzerland. He was from Switzerland. Oh, man. There was a journalist from one of their major newspapers in Sunderland at the weekend. This lad went to the game. He then met up with a club representative on, must have been Sunday, to have a bit of a tour of the town. Because, of course, Sunderland now are really popular in Switzerland with all those Swiss fans of theirs. They're looking at Sunderland and saying, who's this club? Their ownership's got a link to our country. They've now got this big name from our country who we're all really keen on. So yeah, we're in the Premier League and we're now attracting interest from other nations. And if this article is popular, you never know, we might be as well liked in Switzerland as we are in Mexico at the moment.
And Xhaka's signing, Chris, it was obviously, as Andrew's touched upon, yes, he's got everything in terms of being a top quality player in European leagues. But he does offer that leadership. He's got the experience. And it was only, you and I did a pod with Ian Murter a couple of weeks ago, and it hadn't kind of struck me until Ian said it. He said all of the investment in terms of all the players has gone into those more defensive positions. And it's absolutely spot on. You've got, a big fee paid for Xhaka. Alderete obviously came in for a decent fee, named in La Liga Team of the Season last year. You've got Ronaldo, left back there from Atletico, free transfer, come in, 31-year-old. Masuaku, 31-year-old as well. He was in the Turkish League's Team of the Year last year as well from Besiktas. And then we've seen a whole load of other arrivals, who I'm not going to try to pronounce, but we've seen a few come in. But we've really invested in experience at the back, haven't we? Which I think tells you a lot in terms of how the club have kind of gone, okay, here's where we need to prioritise, because the pinpointed positions where we need to strengthen. They've brought players in who will fit into the Brys's system, but we've kind of gone, we need experience, we need know-how in those more defensive positions in the team.
Yeah, and it was exactly what Regis Labrie was talking about during pre-season. That's what he wanted, and I think that was the agreement. I think the club were probably slower to capture the older signings than they were the younger ones earlier on in the window, but they did end up getting them. And Granit Xhaka was the statement one. And I was trying to think when you asked Andrew the question, I mean, you've got to think it's up there with Asamoah Gyan after that 2010 World Cup in terms of a status signing, or Darren Bent maybe. I'm not sure Darren Bent, just in terms of a world name, Asamoah Gyan was potentially a bigger name at the time than when we signed Darren Bent earlier. I'm trying to think of other big, really huge name signings in world football that we've signed in the modern game in the last 20, 25 years. But Granit Xhaka, I think, is up there. I think he's the statement signing. Now, it's interesting because when you think about it, Martin, that obviously he was brought in to do that specific role on the pitch. And of course, he was brilliant at Bayer Leverkusen, and I think, what was he, 15th in the Ballon d'Or list, and all of that comes with it. Fantastic player. But 32-year-old, and he's slotted in, and he looks comfortable. He looks like he's going to kind of be that kind of almost safe pair of feet, I suppose, in front of that back four, which you want. And he's just going to do that by positioning himself and just being clever and using his experience. But it's one of them. It was as much to get him on the pitch for us and do that job that he's so good at, as it was a statement signing for everybody else. It's to send out to everybody to say Sunderland is serious about this. Like, we're able to do that, and that Granit Xhaka signing might have been the trigger to get the later ones that came after him in terms of those signatures, in terms of those more experienced players who might have looked at Sunderland and went, hang on, I've got all these young lads ahead of us, and am I just going to be on my own? Am I just going to take a bit of a beating every week? Is it going to be backs against the wall type stuff? Then you bring Granit Xhaka in to say, hang on, no, we're serious about this. We're going to win a few games this season. We're not looking to, just go back down and bounce straight back up and take the money. Because you look at the last couple of years, and we've talked a lot about the three promoted clubs going straight back down, but there's a lot in that the signals that they have sent out in terms of who they've brought in, where you look at that list of players where even Ipswich have spent over 100 million, but you looked at the players that they brought in, the Jack Clarks even, that top players in the Championship, where it's a signal that you're sending out that's saying you're hedging your bets. You're not saying we are going to be a Premier League club the season after next or the season after this one. You're saying we might be a Championship club, so we've got to think about the players we bring in and who we're going to be happy in the Championship, who are going to be good there, rather than bringing players in from the continent who have just got no interest at all playing in the Championship. And we've been burnt by that in the past. But this Granit Xhaka signing means you bring a level above the ones that we've been used to, maybe. And all right, you're going back a decade, but so I think it's almost like you could probably say a 60-40 split between, 60% buying him for what he does on the pitch, but 40%, just that image. You've got that player, you've got Granit Xhaka at your club, and it means that much for other people when they're looking to sign for Sunderland.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever made a bigger signing than Xhaka. I just think he's a level above anything that I've witnessed. Kelvin might tell us Jim Baxter at the time was a bigger signing.
I did actually think about Jim Baxter.
But, for us, people who saw Len Shackleton and all that sort of stuff might say in terms of a high-profile signing, he was right up there. But I think in the modern era, I don't think anything compares to Granit Xhaka. And, it's had a snowball effect as well. So you say that 40% that he brings, and it's that kind of the butterfly effect almost, isn't it? Because you look at, towards the end of the window, we brought in Mukulele. He played with Xhaka last season, and he said Xhaka would talk to him. I've talked to Granit. He says I needed to come. Right? If Granit says you need to come, you need to come. The Gertrude who came in yesterday, he played with Mukulele at Leipzig. Is it Red Bull Leipzig? He played with him a couple of seasons ago, and he talked to him. So you've got this kind of knock-on effect of this transfer. And the other aspect to this, which we'll only see play out in the fullness of time, is what Kieran Louis-Dreyfus's plan for Xhaka is. Because when he signed, he was talking about this 10-year plan or something, wasn't he? And whether that's a broader thing, because we know that there's this sort of group of sporting activity being built up, which Sunderland's part of, or whether they've earmarked him for a coaching role, head coach role, director of football role, wherever it might be. But there's obviously a longer-term plan there that Xhaka's been kind of enticed by as well. But I just think already, when you see him on the field, when you see him with the captain's armband on, organising the players around, singing Wise Men Say at the end of the game, and pumping his fist, he's bought into it completely. And any of the younger players who come in and they see somebody like that completely bought into what's going on, they're going to buy into it too. You know what it's like. If somebody who you admire and you look up to is completely on board with something, you get on board with it. And, it makes such a difference from people like James Vaughan rocking up and thinking they're bigger than the club. And that wasn't long ago, was it? And
it was. I want to think it was a different lifetime ago, to be honest. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I can't wait for the videos behind the scenes where you see the players on the training pitch play a game of Granit Says, and they've got to jump. But yeah, and it's funny, but exactly what you've said about that, especially that kind of fist pump and kind of aspect to it, because I mentioned on a pod the other week that these players have been here 2 minutes, right? And, considering, you talk about the legends of, Luke O'Nine's that we say buy into the place and the club, the Kevin Balls over the years. Now, these players have been here 2 minutes, really, and a matter of weeks. But already, and again, I do think there's been an education at the club behind the scenes, and I think I mentioned this the other week.
Yeah.
And I think Granit Xhaka has bought into that and is almost passing that education on. As soon as people come in, he's telling them to use this, because you saw against Brentford, and I think it was, I can't remember now, but it probably happened against West Ham as well at the stadium like that. You saw Alderete, Ronaldo, Mukulele, Xhaka, Diarra, Siddiqui, Lafay, Talby, Ding, almost all of those new players to a man at some point put in a sliding tackle and reacted with the crowd afterwards like it was a goal. They all kind of fist pumped it. And it seems to be an education that has told the players, just look at what you've got behind you if you use them. And if you get them on your feet, you'll feel it, and you'll feel kind of another foot taller. And if you give them a boost, they're going to give you a boost. And I think it's definitely a conversation that's gone on, that players are now using this. And like you said, Granit Xhaka is almost at the centre of it, because he's almost the orchestrator in the middle, where he's almost getting the crowd up at the same time as doing his thing in the middle with the players. He's almost egging the fans on at the same time. The other genius thing as well is, and I think this was probably part of the conversation with Xhaka, because look, as a 32-year-old coming back to the Premier League, he probably had slight concerns, and he's probably a confident fella, so I bet you they were very deep inside, but he's probably thinking, are my legs able to cope with the pace of the Premier League for, week in, week out, because he's going to be club captain, you're going to be a play every week. We're not going to buy Xhaka and stick him on the bench, that's for sure. So he's going to play every week. He's probably thinking, how long can I keep up with the pace of this? Use my experience to read the game. How much pace do I need? But then what we did, we said, look, we've got these two lads in front of you, Diarra and Siddiqui, who are going to be alongside you, who are just going to do all the running. And all you need to do is get into the right position, use your nous, use your experience. And you're just going to pick off all the passes, give it easy to these quick lads. The four cross you, Siddiqui, Diarra, Talbi and Adingra. They've got bags of pace. They're going to be swarming all over you. You just do your thing. And but I think that's a part of the genius as well, how we've put these pieces of the jigsaw around Xhaka, who's at the centre of it. And just everything about it's just clever, the way they're doing it.
Absolutely is. And I think, going back to your point about the crowd, how long has the crowd at the Stadium of Light, and us as Sunderland fans, I think for a long, long time, it's been perceived by the club as a negative.
Yeah.
The amount of people who turn up, the amount of passion that people have, the amount of desire to see the team win and turn up and do well. It's internally, I've had the perception for a long time that the crowd was viewed as a hindrance at the club. And I think, it's not been a long thing that's been in place for a long time, but I think the playoff semi-final against Coventry was a realisation that if we get the crowd on side, we can actually use them. And we are far better if there's 48,000 plus these 11 rather than those 48,000 not being on side. And there's been a concerted effort with everything that's going on off the field as well as on the field to get the supporters and the players really and the club really joined together. And it's been so evident, you look at off the field, the work that David Bruce has done, I think has been kind of fundamental to that. And even daft things like the Hummel shirts, right? Get some decent kits, have enough of them to sell, right? It's not bloody rocket science, is it? And then people might wear them on Saturday, right? You might get some kids wearing them throughout the week. Like, it's not rocket science, but it seemed to be such a hard thing for somebody to comprehend for 5 or 6 seasons. But you're absolutely right. And I think there has been conversations internally during the summer. And, Gav's talked about the conversation that Luke O'Nien had with the local press and media outlets, fan media outlets, about the need to all be kind of as one. Those same conversations will have happened with the players as well. You need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, get this lot on side. And part of that, that visible fist pumping and getting the crowd up, when you win a tackle, win a corner, it might be really basic stuff, but it works. And there just seems to have been a real effort to go, right, we're all in this together, because if we've got a chance of staying up, and I think, I'll stake my thing in the ground here, I still don't think with all of this activity that we've had during the summer that we're not going to be in for a long, hard season. And it's going to be a tough season. Yeah, this does not give us right, we're solid now. We're up in the Premier League for the next 10 years. We'll be in Europe next season. Absolutely not. This is still going to be a bloody hard season. And we're going to need every single person involved in the football club to get behind it and carry on as we have done for the first 2 home games. But the other bit to it, to kind of join those conversations up, as a crowd and as a group of supporters, I always kind of feel we know our place insofar as we kind of are comfortable in that mid-table Premier League thing. Because, I suppose we've never really seen us play in Europe. We've never seen us compete in Europe. So we don't feel as if we should be there, but we kind of feel as if we should be, the size of the club, everything else. We should be not involved in relegation battle in the Premier League. We should be
established.
Kind of around, we should be established in the Premier League. We've seen people like Peter Reid, England national, high-profile player, good manager, come in, and the crowd immediately looks up to him, and they'll kind of follow him and take him at his word. Roy Keane had exactly the same effect. When Roy Keane spoke, the crowd listened, he galvanised everybody, got people on side. Mick McCarthy had managed international level, done the same thing, Sam Allardyce. And you've got somebody like that in Xhaka, where he's come in, and again, if Granit says it, you're going to believe it. And I think as a crowd, we've got somebody now who has done more things than we've ever watched Sunderland do in the past. He's played in Europe, he's won the Bundesliga, he's won the Premier League, won FA Cup. Like, the vast majority of our fans have never seen us win anything. You're going to have to be, 60 to have been at the FA Cup final in 1973, if my maths is correct. I'm not pissing anybody off there. But you know what I mean? We've actually got somebody at the club who's leading the club, who's now achieved more than we can hope, or have been hoped to achieve in the past 50, 60 years. And that's massive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, just going to about this season, your statement about this season, to bring it back to Granit Xhaka, he has basically said he's here for the fight. He knows what season we're in for. He keeps repeating that. He's not come and thought, it's going to be an easy season and we're going to finish, 7th, 8th in the league and it's going to coast. I mean, who knows? There's the 1% chance it might turn out that way, but just, that he's not expecting that. Put it that way. No. But just going further, we had Kieran Brady say exactly the same thing. We were talking about the last time we played Brentford, and he said that it was absolutely toxic in terms of the relationship between the club and the fans. And I was actually thinking, you mentioned Roy Keane. While you were talking, I was thinking, well, when was the last time really we had a relationship with the club that you thought it went both ways? That the club actually gave you something and you were putting into the club and you thought, yeah, we've almost got a relationship. It's not one way. And it was probably that Roy Keane era, actually, because we kind of bumbled along quite a bit after that. There was a couple of managers we took to a little bit. But I think at the same time, what happened was after Roy Keane and that interim period, and you talk about what David Bruce has done to the club, that actually, I think for a long time, because I think even with players and outside the club and media, they almost had this perception that Sunderland fans were just toxic. And I think that for the last 10, maybe 15 years, I think we've probably had that reputation within the game. Now, that's not a statement about the fans. It's a statement about what the club are doing to the fans. Because I think for all that time, the club took advantage and took the fans for granted. And we felt that all Sunderland fans felt like that. And we saw the club and how the club treated us, not just in terms of, trying to bumble along on the football side, but off the pitch, we've been in absolute shambles where we haven't treated the fans well enough for a long time, for far too long. Whether it's tickets, whether it's looking after kind of disabled fans. I remember we had a year where disabled fans were just almost forgotten about and ignored. And we were getting letters about them that the club were just ignoring their pleas. I was trying to shop in the club shop for my lad's birthday in the summer. I couldn't actually buy anything. The club shop was empty online, and it was empty in the actual physical shop all throughout the summer. You couldn't get in touch with the ticket office. Just really simple, basic things on how to get people on side. And then when you then have the football inside in place, and you're clever on that front, and you do everything that David Bruce has done, where you for a start, you are a fan. So you've come from that perspective. So you know what you want as a fan. But then on top of that, you listen to fans and you get things in place. Then the fans feel in it together because it's a two-way thing. The club are giving us, they're giving us some love back with just the simple thing. And like I said, it seems, and we've said it for years, that some of these things are just so easy to implement and such big wins. And it's crazy that the club, it's taken this long for someone to come in and say, well, that's just ridiculous. Look, the fans want some nice Hummel shirts, or at least bespoke shirts. Let's get them because they'll buy them. I mean, it's not as you said, it's not rocket science. But the club are giving us all this now, but it's paying dividends. But you see all these little things. You can relate the ticket office and the club shop being run well, and the strips being brilliant, and the club's looking smart, and the fans looking smart. But then what happens is all of that builds up to the fist pumping and the 12th man. That all of that goes into the same pot.
Well, it does, but it because it's backed by action off the field, it's actually legitimate, and you can believe it.
Mm-hmm.
If everything else was shambles, and things aren't really clicking on the field, then somebody does that, you just think, fuck off, you talk. Like, you're just not getting it. Whereas it actually means something, and it's authentic. It's not just, you see, and I agree with you that they've obviously been told, or there's been some conversations had to go, harness the crowd and do this and do that and do that.
Yeah.
But even though they've been given that kind of steer, it's still authentic because it's built from something actually deeper than something surface level.
Yeah, because you've probably been in the crowd as well during that time, last 15 years, where there's been maybe one player on the pitch who's tried to get the crowd up at certain points of a game, where they've tried to give it the old fist pump. And almost you look around you, and it's time, depending on what the situation is, but at times you look around you and people have like almost been on the verge of laughing, going, "Oh God," you know what I mean? But the atmosphere, at times it hasn't been fun to go and watch the lads at the stadium, like, has it?
Well, it hasn't. And, there's different levels to it, isn't there? So if you've got somebody like Joel Lynch or Callum McFadzean doing it, you are going to laugh. If you've got Granit Xhaka doing it, you're going to believe it. So, there's, again, it's all got to kind of make sense and be genuine.
Yeah. Well, that's it. But that's the point. You get the little things right. And but as you said, you've got to back it up on the pitch. You've got to back it up with doing things correctly. And we've never expected Sunderland to win every week. All right, maybe in League One for a season or two, but we don't expect Sunderland to go out and win every week. And I remember games in the Championship just in the last couple of years. I remember Sheffield United away when I think it was when Dan Neil got sent off and we got beat. Standing ovation, because you can see when you see the players giving it, and you know what the club are giving you. If they get beat, you still don't mind. You'll give them a standing ovation because you know that they're giving it some, and you know the club are on the right track.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a nice feel. I think this is kind of the point. We had points during the summer, didn't we, where you can kind of sit back and enjoy what's going on at the club. I think this is going to be, hopefully we have more points during the season, but this is going to be a point where we can, we've got 6 points out of 9 on the board. We've got all the signings done. You're looking at the team and you're kind of going, I can't really pick faults with a win. I don't feel as if we're particularly short anywhere. We added 3 players on deadline day, to fill some gaps that we potentially had. And look, of course, you're relying on players all, a lot of them coming off, a lot of them hitting form, a lot of them settling in. And, there's an awful lot of new players to actually bed into a side. And I think that's the biggest risk at the moment, where you've got so many new players. They are going to take a little while to form connections and all that sort of stuff. But it just feels positive. And as I said, I think we've given ourselves a fighting chance of actually surviving that first season.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, that the new lads at the club are going to be welcoming the new lads at the club.
That's right.
I'll give you a tour around the academy. Like, how long you been here? About 3 weeks. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, God, you're looking at Diarra, and he's one of the more experienced players at the club now because he came at the start of the summer, isn't he? But yeah, that's it. I mean, look, I think I said I was kind of saying to Johnny and Anton when we kind of recorded as things were coming through. If you kind of step back and look, you kind of look for vantage points to go, oh well, was it a bit like that? Was it a bit like that? And you can go back to the kind of, I suppose, the Roy Keane summer where we were like, oh, look at that, we're broken the British transfer record for a goalkeeper, and we brought in all these players. But I generally don't think we haven't seen anything like this in the club's history. I do think the win we've just finished is historic. I mean, for a start, Didier Ndong was our record signing before this summer, and now we've broken it. How many times? I want to say 6 times, 7 times, maybe. We've gone beyond that, but I'll count later. But it's worth an article probably. But you look at that, and we've broken that transfer record so many times in terms of the fee outgoing. We've broken our transfer record in terms of incoming with Jobe, of course. And you look at, even people raised their eyebrows at Nottingham Forest back in 2022 when they spent 142 million. And I don't know the exact figure. It was probably out there somewhere, but it's somewhere in the region of 160, 170 million now that we've spent. So we've not only kind of just beat it by a few, we've absolutely smashed Nottingham Forest's record from a few years ago. And I did say that, whatever happens, because I think you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you, Martin, that we do have to kind of strap ourselves in, and we do have to remember, you look at the first 3 games, and we mentioned it with Kieran Brady, that all of these games have been won on moments, which you'd like to think are a result of the kind of better players you bring in. But every game, I think, in this Premier League is winnable if you get those big moments right, because every game is close for a period. And then obviously if the likes of the Man Cities and the Liverpools get motoring and get 2 up, then okay, it's game over. But for a period of time, it is winnable if you get those big moments right. I mean, just look at the Burnley game. I think first half, if we get that early goal, we run out quite easy winners. It just turns the Premier League's so tight, and the games of chess that go on in certain games. You look at the West Ham game where, Graham Potter reacted to what we did in the first half, and then actually the game swung for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes in that first half, that you thought, oh, hang on, we might be in trouble here for a little bit. And then we had to tinker with things and change the game again. Every game's going to be like that. And, that's where Regis Debris is going to earn his coin this year. But regardless of what happens, going back to that, and I said this to Johnny and Ant, like, we've got to take a moment in this international break to almost sit back and just go, what have we just done as a club? I mean, it's almost, and you go through a lot of crossroads in the club's history. You talked about that Dennis Smith promotion. That Dennis Smith always said that if we'd gone for that, if we'd really gone for it and pushed the boat out, he was convinced that 2 years later, when the Premier League started, that we would have been an established Premier League club because of the progress we were making. There's crossroads in our club's history we can go back to and say, or if we'd gotten it right in that summer, or if we hadn't have done that in that summer, who knows what, the Peter Reid era, losing Don Hutchison and replacing him, and what did we do then? And did we replace Niall Quinn too late? All of these questions that we've asked in the past. Yeah. This summer, whatever happens, we'll say the club couldn't have really done any more. We've gone out, we've
exactly
smashed.
Right.
It's completely historic, and it is going to be a fight. I agree with you, Martin, but I do think this is a crossroads summer where actually potentially 20 years time, when we're still doing on this week, Martin, and we're talking a little bit slower, and we're maybe doing it with a gin or whatever, that we'll be looking back on this summer going, wow, that was the summer that the club really went for it and tried to kick on.
Oh, look, it's a summer of no regrets, isn't it? I think we could not have asked for the club to have any more of a crack at it than they have done. It's not as if we've signed 3 or 4 players and gone, if we just got another 2, we might have had a chance. Like we've given it everything. And look, it speaks to a wider point in football, because if we can't stay up doing what we've done, then they might as well stop relegation from the Premier League. Cut it off. Just finish it. But that pyramid is not viable.
It's broken, isn't it?
Completely. And look, it's pretty broken anyway. But if we can't survive doing what we've done this summer, it's insurmountable, and that is not healthy for football. Also, look, hopefully we can hopefully we can stay up. Because, as I say, if we can't this season, then the whole thing's screwed.
Well, yeah. I mean, good. If they've got something like parachute payments to try and fix it, then they're trying to fix a problem, aren't they? But right. I was just going to put it to you, because you said they've done everything they can. I was just going to ask you, because I'm just trying to look at the squad as a whole and what we've done. I was going to put it to you: is there a position that we could have strengthened any more, where you just think, oh, one more maybe there would have done us? Or is there a position left where you still got that little bit of a feeling or not?
I actually don't, because if you look through the whole squad, you can create points of discussion, right? So you go, well, do we actually need an experienced Premier League backup goalkeeper? Mm-hmm. I read last week David De Gea was linked with us to come in as reserve keeper. Like, would you have got somebody like him? Because if everyone stays fit, I think we've got a pretty strong side once everything clicks. But, would you have more experience? And look, you can kind of create conversation points around that. But I think when you look at the players that we have available, the squad depth that we have, the players from last season who were essentially sidelined at present, who we hope can now kick on and really challenge some of these new signings for their shirt. Like, what you want is for people like Chris Rigg, Dan Neil, etc., and Mundle, when you spit again, to really be putting pressure on the players who have possession of the shirts at the minute to make them better players, but also to push the lads in the team to get more out of them. I think, look, if you're going to be ultra picky, the striker that we've signed yesterday from Ajax, Brian Broby, you're looking at him and going, if you signed him, if this was 12 months ago and you signed him off that back of the season he had 12 months ago, you almost feel as if you've got guaranteed goals coming into the side. But there's mitigating factors to his form from last season potentially. So look, I think barring signing an absolute world class striker, I actually I don't think realistically we could have done much more.
Yeah, I agree.
Where do you do? I thought you were going to disagree.
No, I agree, because actually but that's the model with Broby, isn't it? That if we'd signed him when he'd scored 18 goals or whatever it was the season before last, would have been spending 40 million on him.
Oh, but that's right.
There's always that slight. We sign players for a knockdown fee most of the time because there's that slight question mark somewhere, whether it's fitness or form or off the pitch or whatever it might be. But no, I feel exactly the same. And I think the interesting ones that I think that potentially didn't expect was at the start of the window, and now it's happened. It does make sense. But the Robin Roofs I wasn't 100% sure we would go for a goalkeeper. But this is the interesting thing, because the other one I was going to mention is the deadline day signing of Gertrude. And I think that one is a really interesting one, because you look at him playing at Feyenoord and Leipzig as, first team player. He hasn't come to sit on the bench. And I do wonder whether, as much as we love Trey Hume, Regis Labrie wanted a more dynamic kind of player down that right hand side, because there was hints that we were slightly lopsided in the Brentford game, but that was maybe tactics or not. We kind of, obviously we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But the interesting thing is, when we're going for these, you just mentioned it there. Do we want an older goalkeeper or something to come in as reserve? The interesting thing that we've done is we've gone out and these, your Trey Humes and your Dennis Serkins and your Dan Ballard, your Luke O'Nines, all of these players, your Dan Neils, in their positions, we haven't just got a decent player who's got potential or an experienced player to sit in behind them as to battle with them. We've gone way above them. We're signing a player who's got much better pedigree than you, and on paper is much better than you. And it's just that position's not 100% yours, and you've got to fight it out with that player. Because I think that fight down that right hand side with Gertrude and Hume could be an interesting one.
Well, it will be. And as you say, he hasn't come to sit on the bench, and Mukiele hasn't come to sit on the bench either. So, he's been fortunate to some extent that Ballard was injured, so he comes straight into the side. But part of me kind of wonders whether the approach that we've taken was kind of informed a little bit by Ipswich last season, because the club will have been looking at that and going, okay, look, and everybody at the club knew how good Jack Clarke was. And going, look, they've kept the better players. They've brought in players who were a step above the players in certain positions, and they've tried to take maybe 3 steps forward, and they fell so far short that they've kind of gone, well, actually, we need players who are going to take us 10 steps forward. And like I was saying before, if the other players can keep up with us, great, stick around.
And that's a clever thing, because the Jack Clarke one is a perfect example of how we look at players. Ipswich said, oh, look at Jack Clarke, he's a good player. We look at where a player's ceiling is. And that we, instead of saying, what's he like now, or what can he be in the next 6 months, we're saying, well, what is their ceiling? And I think at the time, I remember saying on a podcast, and go back to this, that actually I was kind of shrugging my shoulders when Jack Clarke left. because I was like so trusting in the players we would bring in, and at the time we'd brought in Romain Mundle to almost come through after Jack Clarke. It was that progression planning, and I just thought, I've got so much faith in us bringing someone else in, and we were so reliant on Jack Clarke. I thought A, we'll become a better team, but B, I've got faith in who that the person they're bringing in is going to fit our team better. And it's just, we've been saying this for a good 3 or 4 years now, that we're so comfortable in windows that you've just got this faith in it. And look, even when they got it wrong, it was this case of, well, we try to bring in younger players and that they'll learn from it and get it right. And, that we were still, and because progress isn't linear, that you have to, you can't expect season upon season to just be better than the season before. You've got to say, oh, well, next season, okay, this might happen because we've got these players, or we've got these players moving out, or it's their last season and we've got these 2 players moving ahead of them. And, you've got like a progression plan where where players are maybe going to go out and the young players start coming in, and you sell players at the right time. So it's just this faith that they've got that plan and kind of they know what's that. And some of these transfer signings, I think, we were talking about Broby being a potential reaction to Guiu moving, but actually it sounds like with us talking to him for a month or so that wasn't the case, and he might have come in anyway. That we might have had a fourth.
I think he would have.
So, and the other thing on that was they might have been safe in the knowledge, like, okay, well, if we might miss out, but we know what we're going to do in January, and we've got a plan for that. Obviously, depending on what happens in terms of injuries and things, but they'll have a plan for January already in terms of what they're going to pull out the bag.
Well, I'm sure the recruitment team can start work, or they will already be working on January, I suspect. But
that's probably next summer as well, I think.
Well, that's right. But look, that's probably a good place to leave this one. I suspect the recruitment team will be having a few days off, but we will not be. We'll have podcasts for you every single day. Thank you to Chris. Good to catch up with you and talk about all of the good things that are happening.
Yeah, well, that's it. I can't talk enough about this historic. I mean, I genuinely think it's absolutely huge. And I just, like I said earlier, it's worth taking a minute just to realise what we've done this summer.
No, it is. It's like, it's not even generational. It's historic. Like, absolutely right. What we've done, I think, it's certainly surpassed my thoughts on what was actually even possible this summer. And again, you just got to bloody hope that it works. But look, we'll deal with all of those ups and downs as the time comes. Thanks also to Andrew as well. He had to duck off a few moments ago. And look, who would have thought that in a podcast talking about all of the good things that have happened at Sunderland over the summer, all of the great transfers that we've made, we would actually manage to name Joe Lynch, Callum McFadzean, James Vaughan and Jordan Willis. So look,
puts it into perspective.
It does, and it still shows that what's gone on in the past is very hard to forget. But yes, we'll have podcasts for you every single day. And remember to keep an eye on the website at rokereport.sbnation.com for all of your Sunderland content. But until next time, it's goodbye from us.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.